You can go ahead and take a seat. Thank you, worship team. Thank you so much. As I referred to a little while ago, we are in a series called Starting Point, and it's been fun so far. Let's see if we can't add to that. Tall people have been using this table. This series goes to the idea of everything, and I do mean everything, has a starting point. Elements had a starting point. Ideas. You had a starting point. Whether it was intentional or accidental, doesn't matter. We're really glad you got started, and we're really, really glad that you're here. One of the things that we talked about is that even faith has a starting point. And so what we're breaking this down, break it down. Okay. We want to be able to say that we have a strong and vigorous faith as adults. It is good to have childlike, simple faith, but you don't want a childish faith. A faith that only worked because you were a kid and they told you all those stories. Before I go any further, I had a conversation about this series with someone on Friday, and here's what I encouraged him to do, and I will encourage you to do as well. You may be sitting in the Cortez campus here, or you may be sitting in your campus, your home, or wherever you're watching this from. I would encourage you to, if you know anyone that's not here, not engaging with this, would you please reach out to them this week and say, here's how you get to the YouTube version of it, or you go to the archives on the Church Center, and just invite them to watch the first one, and then the second one, and then this one when they get a chance, and say, I just want to have a conversation about it with you. Don't preach at them. Just say, watch it, and then tell me what you think, because I have some thoughts as well, you could say. That's the nature of this whole Starting Point series, is to start some conversations to examine or to explore faith, what it really means. And then here's the thing that's going to happen, and it's already happening in the background, but soon it will be happening to where everybody can sign up for it, is that Starting Point is a ministry that goes on, and it happens in 8 increments, 8 weeks, once a week, and you get a chance to sit down and explore faith around the things that I'm talking about, the big ideas. People can express their doubts, their fears, their questions. But they can also have a chance to experience community and be able to make some friends around this whole thing of a faith journey. So if you would do that, that would be awesome, because faith has a starting point and can have a starting point in anyone's life. I've told you the funny stories about mine because I literally was, well, not literally. I think my mom actually did go to the to the hospital, but I could honestly say I was born in the church nursery. I've been around church all my life. I know all the stories. I can tell you all the heroes of the faith. And yet I had to come to a point to realize that there's really no effective value to a second-hand faith. It needs to be firsthand. But what you come from may be different from mine. It's like, well, we kind of dropped into church every now and again, and I picked up some things. And, it got a little confusing. And by the time I got into my teens, my early 20s, and life was coming at me literally at the speed of life, it's like the stories about Noah and the 2x2 animals, that wasn't working for me. It's like I had people who said, did that even happen? And you go, I don't know how to argue that point. Or, somebody asked me the other day, have you ever heard of Ruth? Like, well, yeah, I've got an Aunt Ruth. It was like, but I don't know the Bible story of Ruth or Esther or Mary Magdalene or any of those, and yet it seems like if you go to church, you're supposed to know all these things. In other words, it's like, I need something that works on the rugged plains of reality because I'm paying bills and raising kids and trying to get through the day. And all that patchwork of stuff from my past does not seem to carry enough, it's not strong enough to carry the weight of my life. I guess what I would say is most people I talk to don't go, I'm just out and out denying the faith in Jesus Christ. It's just like I kind of outgrew it. And I'm here to tell you, I don't think you have to be someone who outgrows their faith. It's just maybe you need a new starting point. Maybe you've never come to Christ and you need a starting point that actually makes sense to an adult. Or maybe you need to restart your faith because you got so confused along the way. That's what this whole series is about. And it's overly simple in some ways because today you're going to go, that's it? And I'm going to go, yeah. You got a problem with that? No. I'm just saying, don't underestimate how important it is that we break it down into the parts that really matter, that we understand those, and then we start putting them together in a way that you can build a rugged, durable, strong faith. That's what Starting Point is for. The premise of what we've been asking all along is, even if we didn't have this collection of documents that helps us, and there is value to it, but a lot of people say, well, that's what the Bible says. And like, don't Bible at me, bruh, okay? I'm saying, what would you do if you didn't have the Bible? Because for nearly 300 years, the followers of Jesus Christ did not have the New Testament. They were writing the New Testament, and yet people were coming to an understanding that there is a God, that you can know Him, that you can deal with your sin, and all these things, and the church grew at an exponential rate, and yet it didn't have the New Testament. Isn't it great that we're so blessed that we have it? But I'm saying, what would you do? What kind of questions would you ask? And you better make them good questions, because ask the right questions, get the right answers. If you're not asking the right question, you're probably going to wind up getting the wrong answer. So I think, and I think I can make a pretty strong case for it, the best question you can ask, and I think you should be asking, is, who is Jesus? Because that's a tough one. That's a tough one to wrestle to the mat. Is He who He says He is? Is there reason for us to believe that what He said is true? Who is Jesus? And what authority does He speak on to be able to say things that actually have changed the whole history of the planet? So I think one of the most important questions you can ask is, who is Jesus? Underlying question of everything we're doing. And I will point you to, well, there were eyewitnesses, about 9 of them, that wrote in some way, we heard Him, and yeah, He was a great teacher, but the thing they keep coming back to is, we saw this man alive, we saw Him crucified and dead, and then we saw Him alive again. And they wouldn't shut up about that. In fact, a lot of them died because they wouldn't shut up about that. And they weren't screaming, oh, His teachings were great. They were saying, He rose from the dead. Okay, who's Jesus? Most critical information, the resurrection of Jesus. Then it was fun last week, wasn't it? Come to church and have the pastor just pretty much rake you over the coals. Because you walked in thinking you what? You were a mistaker. And in the end, I convinced you, hopefully, that you're not a mistaker. You're a... Some of you actually did listen to what I said. That's great. That's great. Yeah, I mean, it's true of all of us. That's why I say we're a colossal collection of moral fellows. None of us escape that. We're not mistakers. A mistake is some things like, oh, I didn't have enough information. But what do you do whenever you keep making, quote unquote, the same mistake over and over again, even though you try not to? Or sometimes you actually schedule your mistake, and then you plan it. Is that really a mistake? Nope, it's not. And I said, okay, you're wrestling with a big idea of who is Jesus. Is like, what are you going to do about sin? Because it's a lot heavier and a lot more important than just making mistakes. Then, if you meld those two together, and I hope that you will stick with me, and if you have to be out of town or whatever, go to the archives. Please don't miss each one of these installments. Because the question then becomes, if Jesus is who He says He is, what did Jesus say about this seemingly inescapable idea of sin? What was His take on it? And how will that impact how you build a durable faith. Okay, now today, like I said, this one is so super simple. You're going to go, I don't know. Do not let its simplicity fool you. Because what we're going to be talking about right now, we're going to step back into history, and some of you are already rolling your eyes. You're going, I hate history. I hate history. Well, but see, we need to, if you ignore history, you're just bound to repeat it, okay? History is important, but I want you to go back in history with me to see, well, if there is a God and he has expressed himself in this person of Jesus and sin is a real thing, then the next question in my mind is, how can I have a clear understanding of where do I stand with God? Because if there is this holy God and then there's this unholy me, how do you where's the meeting point? Do you have to jump through a bunch of hoops? What do I have to do? Who holds the keys to the check? Who's got the clipboard that's checking off all the things to see if I've done them all? So we're going to step up and see some big picture stuff. We're going to step back because there's a lot of stuff in the past that you need to know in order to successfully move forward. In other words, yes, faith has a starting point, but write this down. The story of faith has a starting point too. And it's important to know where that started, because that way it's like, well, we aren't just making this up as we go along. So the story of faith has a starting point. I don't know. A lot of us in this room have had some church experience. I know that we have some people who would say, I was raised Lutheran. Some people would say I've been raised Baptist, Presbyterian, LDS, Catholic. Was with someone who said, I've done practically every one of the denominations. I practiced Islam for a while. I know people who've gone down the Hindu road, and those who, we come from all kinds of points of the compass where that's concerned. Okay, your faith tradition, whatever it is, has a history. It has a history. Who are the major players? You're going, I don't care because I got to pay bills this week. It's coming up. There's a lot of month left at the end of the money kind of thing that I'm feeling right now. And I'm saying, well, just stick with me, and you need to deal with this. Part of the reason you might have drifted is because you didn't know the history of your faith. So I want us to pull on one thread. Do not skip over it. It's very simple, but it is essential. I want to talk about the three most influential faith traditions throughout the world. That would be Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. And you say, why are you talking about that? Because there's this curious thing that happens. There's one point at which they all come together. They all agree on this one thing. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all believe and teach about a single God. He goes by different names, but there's this idea that there is one God. And each of those faith traditions claims that God is the one who created the universe and created the first man. And interestingly, all three of them say that man's name was Adam. And you're going, well, I'm not sure I believe that. That might be a fairy tale. Well, let me tell you something. The Jews believe that because from the books of Moses, which would be Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, they claim that that's what was revealed to Moses, and he wrote it down. Islam, Muhammad said that Adam was the very first prophet, and that he was the first man, and that you need to pay attention to what he had to say, that he was the first Muslim. You say, but we're Christians. That's what we claim to be. We're professing Christianity. The reason Christianity says that Adam was the first man goes back to that thing about the resurrection. And that is, we believe that Adam was the first man because Jesus taught that Adam was the first man. Now, you can take up that argument however you want, but here's what I would say about so many things about Christianity. We're going to go with the guy who said, I'm going to die, and then I will rise again, and then he pulls that off. There may be a lot of things he tells me that I do not understand because I've got a pea brain. But if he says it, I'm going to die, I'm going to come back to life, I'm going with that man. That's where I'm going. I'm a Jesus follower, and that is why Christianity believes that Adam was the first man. Here's another thing that they all agree on. Judaism, Islam, Christianity all teach that humans messed up this world because they disobeyed what God had to say. They agree that humans messed up God's original design because of our choices as human beings. In other words, what we would probably say, whether we have a faith tradition or not, we'd say, yeah, if it had been me in that particular situation, I still would have dropped the ball and I would have made mistakes. We all agree the world has gone bad because not of our mistakes, but because of the sin of us humans. Because let's face it, everybody you lock eyes with is not a mistaker, they're a sinner. And all three of these agree, and they come together around one single individual. And you're going, are you going to get to anything today, David? Walk with me. They come together, and this is crazy. This is crazy that the population, the general population of the entire world, comes together around one single guy. And they all seem to believe or say or profess that this one man somehow interacted with God, and that's where God began to actually clean up the mess that sin caused in the world. Are you following with me, church? Just think about that. We can't even agree on most of our laws in the United States. To get the whole world to agree that there was one guy that God interacted with, no matter what your religion, it's like he interacted with this one man in order to clean it. That's an astounding thing. I'm just saying, things that make you go, is very important to understanding the history or the story of your faith. It's where God began to correct all the evil and the brokenness of the world. And some of you, I can see it in your eyes. You're kind of leaning forward in the seat. You've been to enough Sunday school that some of you are just so wanting to go, ooh, 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 pick me, pick me. I know who that guy is. If you're like that, would you please blurt out who you believe that person to be? Yeah, we have a winner. You get 100,000 points just for saying his name. Put it in your notes. The three largest faith traditions claim the same starting point, and his name is Abraham. I'm going to call him Abe a lot because I'm just too lazy to say all those syllables. I'm just going to say Abe. It's interesting. Christianity, Islam, Judaism, they all look at Abraham as the faith father. They're the father of faith. They say in their own ways, each one of these faith traditions says that somehow God spoke, God interacted with this man Abraham in very practical ways, and in doing so, God was wading into the middle of the mess that is sin and brokenness and evil. That's where they all come together. They all come together around Abe. And stick with me, and it's also where they go in completely different directions, and it's in this guy Abe. So now that we're thoroughly confused, I'm just wanting you to know, Judaism goes one way in believing some things about Abraham. Christianity goes another direction, and then Islam later comes along and goes a totally different way. Which, if you're sticking with me, you got to go, well, why? Why did that happen? And that will be the context of the rest of the message, and it's where I want you to be able to wrestle with. What's that about? Why did they all come together around that guy, and then why do they scatter in different directions because of this man? Why the convergence? Why the divergence? Because it would seem, according to all these traditions, and there are other reasons to believe, but it would seem by all accounts this guy actually lived. He lived a whole long time ago. What we're about to read happened at approximately 1,876 years before Jesus showed up. So we're talking about he lived, according to the historians, he lived 4,000 years ago or so. I want to shine some light on him, particularly on one conversation this man had. And it is recorded for us, and I think that's amazing. The reason is because it intersects with something that you have wondered about, something that you have pondered over in one way or another. It intersects with something you have wondered about and wrestled about. Maybe you're actually wrestling with it today, or maybe it was back in the day. And the wrestling match sounds something like this, and that is, if there is a God, then how am I doing with him? Am I making a passing grade? Am I good? Am I in good with him, or am I on the outs with him? The other question you may go, I don't even have that kind of question. My question is, if there is a God, does he even know who I am? Is he personal like that? If he does know who I am, does he care? Does he care about me? Does he care about my success or my pain? That would be a good place for somebody to go, or, I've never thought that. Does God hear my prayers? Can I even know where I stand in relationship to him? Is it possible, the question would be, is it possible to have any peace or security about where I stand with God? In this conversation that we're going to shine a light on, I think you can discover something so essential to answering that question, because it's just one statement. And that's the thing. Sometimes the most important stuff happens and you go, there was no fanfare, there was no spotlight, there was no thunder and lightning. It was just something very powerful and something earth-shattering, and yet it was so quiet. That's what I want to leave you with today. Now, to get you to feel what I'm talking about, I'm asking you a personal question, and that is, have you ever made a mess? And I'm talking about a physical mess. Especially the kind that whenever it happened, wherever it happened, you just kind of wanted to go and close the door and maybe go out and find some matches. Because, it would have been easier to burn it down than to go back in and clean it up. Yes? It's a horrible feeling, isn't it? I've got 2 or 3 of them. I got to tell you these stories, and maybe you can tell me yours in days to come. Let me start with this one. When we moved on to the property that we live on now, it was we lived in a 1972 model single-wide mobile home that had been smoked in forever and ever, amen. And it was awful. But we got it all cleaned up. It was great. It was our little home. It was so cool. Went out one night over to Durango to celebrate my dad's birthday. Come back at about 9:30. This was in July, so the sun had just barely gone down. We turn into our driveway, and the headlights hit our 1972 single-wide mobile home, and you're going, that don't look right. I guess a microburst had come that evening, and it peeled the entire roof like a sardine can off of our mobile home. And you stand there going, what are we going to do now? And then also thinking about, not that I'm a cat lover, but we had a cat who hated to go outside, and now the inside is inside, and what are we going to do about that? And it started to rain, so everything inside's getting wet. It was a mess. I just wish someone could have come with a blowtorch. That would have been so much easier. Oh, goodness gracious. You remember that, Lan? What's that?
Somebody came and fixed the roof.
Well, yes, we finally did get somebody to pull the can back together there. I was talking to a friend this week. He borrowed his dad's truck to get ready to go somewhere. He had a fire extinguisher that was in the truck, inside the truck with him with no pin in it. He went and took a turn. It went off. Poof! All of it, just white. And he said, I could barely figure out how to get the truck pulled over to the side of the road. It was his dad's truck. What do? You get out of the truck and you go, and then you pick up the phone and I don't even know who you call. Dad, guess what happened? That's awful, awful. Thankfully, his dad had some grace, said, well, just clean it up the best you can and let's get with it. Here's another one that just astounds me. A guy I know that they like we do, have a whole collection of hot sauces, and they had one of those big bottles of Tabasco. Anybody with me? It's like, yeah, can't make them big enough. You want to make it, get one. Anyway, this is a big one. And they had just moved into this house, went in the pantry to get the Tabasco, dropped it on a tile floor, a stone floor. It shattered into 1,000,000 pieces. Tabasco goes under the baseboards. It goes everywhere. That was the wife who did that. She called up her husband and said, honey, I know we just moved into this house, but we need to move. It's like, where do you start? Where do you start? Another friend, and this gets a little bit more tragic, and then I'll tell you the one that was, it was kind of tragic for us until it wasn't. But a friend of mine, he was off in his office at the house. The only other person in the in the house is his 17-year-old daughter. She went to get something off of some glass shelves in the kitchen, and that shelf broke, and that shelf broke, and that shelf broke, and it all went onto a granite countertop, and then the whole thing fell on the floor. She was literally standing in a sea of glass barefoot. When he came in the room, all she did was, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Where do you start? He's like, well, I had shoes and, I had boots on. So he said, I kicked the big pieces out of the way and I waded through the sea of glass and I said, get on my back. And then crunch, crunch, crunch. He took her out of the danger zone and got her all cleaned up. Okay, you getting the picture? Now let me tell you my little sad story, okay? Whenever Leanne and I were early married, we were living in Nashville, Tennessee. I've always been one that I want to wash the dishes. I have no idea why that's a thing, but I want to do that. Okay, so I was in the kitchen of our little apartment because it was just her and me, and I'm there in my tighty-whities washing the dishes. Okay, this plays into the story. That's why I have to tell you that. Is I'm washing the dishes and I've got big pudgy hands, so I'm down in one of our favorite drinking glasses and I'm washing, and all of a sudden it busts while I'm doing this and it slices my hand as I'm doing this. Yeah, isn't that fun? I hope everybody's enjoying this at home. Here's the thing. I don't really get squeamish over other people's blood, but when it's mine, it just does something to me. And I look down, and there is blood. There's blood in the water. And then there's blood in the soap bubbles. And I'm like, honey, I have cut my hand. To which she's like, okay, well, let me help you. So she grabs a dry washcloth, and she gives it to me. She's like, hold that on there and come with me into the bathroom. We've got a little bitty apartment. So, 16 steps around, I go into the bathroom. And she said, wait right there. I'm going to go get your jeans and stuff so that we can take you to the ER and maybe get you stitched up. Well, here's another thing. The whole prospect of being stitched on does something to my brain. It's not something I can control. And so that's when the tunnel vision starts. She's in the other room, and she tells me from her point of view, while I'm standing there trying to hold the thing on the cut, and she told me about stitches and all that. She's in the other room, and she hears. I had fallen basically just like this, and my head is laying right next to the toilet. In fact, it's bending up my ear. And now that I'm in a reclining position, I come to and I'm thinking, where am I? And how did I get here? But I will have to say, I was still holding that thing on that cut. She gets me all jeansed up because I can't, go on presentable to the ER. And then she drives in there, and thankfully I didn't have to have stitches, but it bled and it bled and it bled. It was awful. No, back to the story. I just want y'all to know how Leanne reacted. What really happened after, and all that did really happen, but whenever I realized I was laying there next to the toilet, Leanne came in and said, what in the world are you doing on the floor? And then she said, I went in the kitchen and I saw the glass that you broke and the mess that you've made. You've dripped blood everywhere. I just can't believe that you did that. And then she said, I just need you to lie there next to that toilet and figure out how you got yourself into this mess. And you also need to be coming up with a plan on how you get yourself out of this mess. Because it serves you right. You should have been more careful. And then she stormed out of the room. From your laughter, I'm pretty sure that you do not believe that last part that I told you, right? But my point in telling all those stories, and especially that one and the way I told it, is that's what a lot of you think God is like. Which is an interesting point. You think that God strolls through the middle of the gigantic mess that you have made of your life, and he shakes his finger in your direction, and then he mumbles something like, well, there you go again. I figured, hey, you made your bed, you lie in it. I'll be over here taking care of more important things, but when you come to your senses and come up with a plan to get yourself out of this, well, maybe then you can call me and we'll see if we'll be friends again. Now, here I'm connecting dots. You don't believe that about Leanne, but you do believe that about God. So by some way, you figured out that Leanne's more holy than God. Amen. Which I love her and I would give my life for her. She's not more holy than God. And here's the other thing I want you to know. That is not the way God interacts with you. Maybe there's something about God that you've overlooked or something that you don't know. Because what Leanne really did is she ran back in the bedroom, got my clothes, she took care of me, got me to the hospital, got me the help that I needed. Now, I will add, and this is true, she laughed at me the whole time and still does to this day. But she does all of that because she loves me. I want you to see that in a similar way, human beings, mankind, had so screwed things up. Sin had tainted and polluted the whole creation and relationships and systems. And 4,000 years ago when this conversation happened, it was literally every man for himself. There was no structure. There was no... This was pre-Judaism. This is pre-Christianity. This is pre-Islam. There is nothing. It's just make it up as you go. Every man for himself. Survival of the strongest. Slavery between human beings wasn't even questioned. Everybody would take whatever they wanted when they wanted to take it. It was offensive. It was offenses at every direction all the time. And that is the sinful mess. That is the sea of glass. That is the bloody mess that God has chosen to wade into. If indeed God is good and he is a God of redemption, he had to make a decision as best we can understand, an infinite, almighty, all-wise God. He had to have made a decision, do I wade into the mess and start cleaning this up that somebody else actually created, it wasn't my fault, or do I simply hang an out of order sign on the world and say, well, it was a horrible experiment? The three major faith traditions, they believe that God decided to wade into the mess, and it wasn't a mess he made, it was a mess that human beings had made. And like I said, around 1876 BC, he interacts with this guy by the name of Abraham. And that's curious because Abraham, though we call him like the father of faith and all that stuff, and you may even have a laminated picture of him in your wallet and all that kind of stuff, he was just an ordinary, everyday kind of guy. You say, no, he was in the Bible. He was an everyday, ordinary kind of guy. He was a part of a colossal collection of moral foul-ups. You say, how do you know that? Well, he wasn't Superman and he wasn't super righteous. And you can read his story. It's all in Genesis. You can read it one time when they're traveling in this outlaw of a world, sense of a world. He goes to Egypt. He's pretty sharp. Some of the Egyptians start looking at his wife, Sarah, and he could tell the look in their eyes that, hey, they take her, they kill me, or they kill me and they take her. And these Egyptians come on and say, you know what? We want your wife, and we're going to take her back to Pharaoh. And he goes, wife? She ain't my wife. He was doing what he could do to save his own skin. He said, you can take her. She's my sister. This is not a hero of the faith. You think you have loyalty issues? Just read the Bible. I'm just saying. So this Bible character, and you can read it for yourself, he had all kinds of problems. He had all kinds of issues. He was so normal and he was so broken. But God said, I've got to start somewhere, and I'm going to pick that guy. He's just minding his own business. So he picks an ordinary guy by the name of Abe to be the starting point of something that was anything but ordinary. We're just going to look at a couple of verses. You can read all the surrounding stuff, but this is from the book, The Writings of Genesis. This is chapter 12, verse 1. God begins to interact with this man. His name, he called himself Abram at that time. The Lord said to Abram, go. What? Yep. He said, go from the country where you are, and he was pretty influential and affluent. He said, go from your country. In other words, leave everything you know and everything that makes you comfortable. Go from your country and your people and your father's household. And he says, where am I going? And God says, let me finish. You go from what you're comfortable with, and you just start going, and I will tell you when you get there. He said, go to the land I will show you. I'll say it again. What he was saying to Abraham was, Abe, you just need to pack up everything you got, including all your employees. You leave all of your circle of influence, and you just need to get going. I'm not going to tell you where to go. I'm going to give you the general direction, but no specifics. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to isolate you so that I am the only one you can depend on. Is anybody feeling what I'm laying down to you? If you haven't connected the dots, not trying to make you into Abraham, Mark, but I'm saying when you said what you said, same kind of thing. Why? Because God says to Abraham, Abe, I'm trying to start something new. It's ultimately going to impact the entire world. And I realize that you and Sarah, even though you're way on up in years, you don't have any kids. You think that Sarah's so old she can't have any kids, but trust me, I am choosing you. I am restarting this whole thing with you, Abraham, because I've got to clean up the mess. And then he also said to Abe, he said, Abe, don't ask me why, because I just got to start somewhere. Okay, it's recorded that he made him three promises to Abraham. Now listen to me, whoever's listening and whenever you're listening. I'm not trying to convince you. There's not going to be an altar call at the end of this message. I'm just wanting you to think. I'm not trying to convince you that any of this is true. I'm saying if it's true, then you got to consider it and at least be curious about it. What is going on here and why did it play out the way that it did? Number one, promise number one, he said you're going to be a nation. Genesis 12:2, he says, I will make you into a great nation. To which, modern day time, Israel would say, yep, you're looking at it. We are the nation. God was right. We are the nation. And yet their Palestinian cousins are going, no, it's the Arab world, and we have multiple nations, and they came from Abraham. I don't know if you all knew that. They've all been arguing about that for a long, long time. To which God says, I don't like the arguing, but I will. That's what I said. I will make a nation out of you. What do you know? I did it. There is no argument over the fact that a lot of great and influential nations can trace their roots all the way back to Abraham. And remember, this was a promise that was made 4,000 years ago. He said, I'm trying to clean up a very big mess. And it is curious that he starts with a guy who's got issues. And he promises to make him into a nation, which requires a family. You know what? Whenever he hears this, he's going, you know how long it takes to make a baby? And then for that baby to make more babies? You know what this is like? this is going to take a long time. That's like calling 911 and they say, we'll get to you just as soon as we build the ambulance. I thought it was funny because sure hope I don't have to wait that long. He made another promise. He says, I'm going to make your name great. You're going to have a great name. So he says, I'm going to make you into a great nation. The verse continues, and I will bless you and I will make your name great. Let me just do a real quick check. Before you walked in today and knew I was talking about this guy, Abraham, how many of you knew of the man by the name of Abraham? Could I see a show of hands? What? In Southwest Colorado? 2025? What about this? Let me just do a check. How many of you ever heard of Chedorlaomer? I dare you to spell it. He was the king of Elam. I'm like, not helping me, dude. Because Elam doesn't exist anymore. He was a very influential king at the very same time Abraham was doing this thing. You ever heard of Chedorlaomer? Nope. Okay. So, you see my point. Isn't it curious that an average guy, not an influential king from 4,000 years ago, is known in practically every language around the world today? Wonder why. Third promise. He says the world's going to be blessed. The whole world will be blessed because of you. He says all the peoples on earth will be blessed through you. In other words, when he's saying the whole world, he's saying all the people groups, all the language groups around the world will in some way benefit or be better because of you. The Muslim nations to this day will say, yes, all the Muslims and all of our nations are better off because of that one man, Abraham. Jews would say, we and all the influence we have had through the ages in various cultures have benefited from this one man, Abraham. Christians would say, that's actually talking about us. The blessing is on us and how the world's been blessed because of the influence that could be traced back to Abraham through a person by the name of Jesus, the Christ. Just from a history perspective, just from a historical perspective, isn't it weird how the world's three major faith traditions all say he's ours? Do you think that's just a set of ancient coincidences? I don't know. Maybe you do. I'll just say it is a measurable fact that no one in history or even in current events comes close to impacting and influencing the entire human population more than Abraham. And that's fun and all because I love history and y'all are going, please. Let's talk about it from a personal standpoint. It is amazing that Abe and Sarah, his wife, are very old, and yet God says to them that he's going to make Abe into a great nation in all. So Abe does exactly what you and I would do. He looks around, he says, we ain't got no kids. And so he starts coming up with this plan B so that he can try and make it so, because if he dies without kids, then the promise dies, and the guy who's his chief right-hand man, he gets all his stuff, and the legacy will be inherited by this guy by the name of Eliezer. And Abraham says, I don't want that to happen. I know you made those promises, but I do not see how it's going to happen. I don't know about all that, but I don't want Eliezer to be the heir. I want a son. So the writer of Genesis records what God said in response to that prayer. This is in Genesis 15. He says, then the word of the Lord came to him, talking about Abe. And he said, this man, Eliezer, will not be your heir, but a son who is your own flesh and blood will be your heir. In other words, he said, Abraham, listen. Don't worry. I've got this. You will have your own kid. And it goes on to say that God, took him, Abe, outside. And we live in an area very similar to what they would have, and we have dark skies. Because, you go out at night and look up at the stars in Denver, there's 3 of them. Oh, wait, that one is Venus. That doesn't count. There's 2. But here in Southwest Colorado, if you go out on a moonless night, you go, dang, that's a lot of stars. He says, look up at the sky and count the stars if indeed you can count them. And then he said, so shall your offspring be. In other words, you know what? I'm very aware, let's be clear, I'm very aware you don't have a son, but Abraham, you're going to have to trust me here. I'm up to something. It's something really big, and I want to use you to make this happen. But you're going to have to trust me here. Because there's going to be more people in your family than you would ever be able to count. But you're going to have to trust me here. You're going to have to believe me. And this is where it gets really personal and powerful, and that's whenever Moses starts writing this. It's something so profound. It looks like something you would just skip over. Maybe you've heard it before and you didn't think much about it, but I'm just telling you, this is crucial, so significant. It's significant. What's significant about it is it survived 4,000 years, and we're talking about it today. It's very significant because it's the very first time, by all accounts, this has ever happened in human history. It is so significant because this is a statement that apparently has never been made prior to this time in any religious writings. That's how significant this is, because the story of faith has a starting point. I think it's also significant because it states so clearly and so simply how human beings and God can relate to one another, and yet we skim over it. And yet it has such implications on you personally if you're trying to start a durable, vigorous faith. It is smack dab in the middle of this age-old question of, is it possible for little old me to even be known by God? Does He know my name? Does He hear my prayer? Can I even know where I stand in relationship to Him? This next statement, God answers that question, defines the terms. How can I know where I stand with God? Here, I'm going back. You used to think you knew when you were a kid because you heard all the stories and it all made sense. And then it started not making sense because you heard all these voices and opinions and stuff, and now you're grown up and you really want to know. The statement is so powerful. This is where Christians go one way, Jews go another, Muslims go a different way. They all go scatter in different directions. But I will simply say to you, they all get... It's really hard for anybody to ever take this at its word. It's hard. Every faith tradition, they have a hard time fully and completely accepting it. They want to take it, co-opt it, spin it, add to it. Because it's almost unbelievable. It's just almost too good to be true. Remember, this was written hundreds of years before the Ten Commandments. 2,000 years nearly before Jesus shows up. 2,600 years before Muhammad writes his stuff. And this is the statement. This is the statement that God makes to a very ordinary, everyday kind of guy by the name of Abraham. It's in verse 6. Abraham believed the Lord, and God credited it to him as righteousness. Nope, didn't hear any thunder. Nope, didn't see any flashing lights. Do not miss what's going on. He leaned in Abraham's direction and said, Abe, you're going to have to trust me on this because I am wading into the middle of the mess. We're going to clean it up. I'm going to use you. I'm going to give you a family. I'm going to give you a really, really big, big, big family. But you've got to believe me. And Abraham says, okay. Okay, God. I don't understand it. Can't explain it. I don't understand it. But I trust you. In that single solitary moment, just that simple and personal expression of faith from an ordinary guy, Scripture tells us that God reckoned or gave him to his account. He said, I know you're going to make a big mistake with your wife, and then there's all the things that you do. I know all that. But in spite of that, because you have trusted me, because you are trusting me, you are now all your sin forgiven. You are now have a right standing with me. I don't know, as a preacher, I go, that is a pivot point in all of history. And I love telling the good news, a defining moment. God says, Abraham, I want to give you a gift, and the gift is I'm giving to you right standing with me. You are an unholy man, but I am a holy God, and I am giving you this gift because you say, I will trust you. Abe, even though sometimes you're dense and hard-headed, and I know the things you're going to do, I accept you. Simply because you believe and trust me. In other words, trusting God resulted in a right standing with God. This is the very first indication that a human being can have a right standing with God. And how did it happen? Faith. It's not a warm, fuzzy feeling. It's not a consternated look on your face. It's simply saying, you know what, God, I don't know everything about you, but you seem to be trustworthy, so I'm going to put my trust onto you. And I don't know how you're going to do it. In other words, listen to me. Don't lose me. This is not believing in God or believing in the fact that there is a God. This is not believing in God. This is believing onto God, just like you do with any of your relationships. And here's the deal. Just us taking this journey of discovery. You can see that the Jews did one thing. And you go, and this has a point? Yes, just stick with me. All these years would go by. The Jews would come along, and they would have their law and all that. And they would say, well, it's not quite just believing on God. It's you have to have right, the way to have right standing with God is you have to be Jewish and you have to know all 613 of the laws and you have to keep them. We are God's chosen people, so you need to be like us and then you can be accepted by God. And by the time that Jesus had showed up, they actually said to him, whenever he'd confront them on this, he said, you know, we don't need to do what you're saying because we're already Abe's kids. So that's enough. In other words, they were saying our right standing with God is all about who you're related to. About 620 years after Jesus was on the scene, Muhammad, in about 620 AD, comes along and he says, no. You don't have right standing with God because you believe. The way you have right standing with God is that you believe in a God and you believe in his prophets, and then you must do these certain acts of righteousness, and then maybe whenever you pass from this life to the next, you can figure out whether you did enough good things. In other words, at the end, all your good works are going to be measured against your bad works. Allah will determine whether or not you have earned a right standing with him, but you won't know till the end. But it's all about what you do that matters. And Christians, I'd love to put us on a pedestal, but I'm just saying you can read it for yourself. About 45 minutes after Jesus ascended to heaven, they started arguing about it. Some parts of the group said, you know, you got to become Jewish first, keep all the law of Moses, then you can become a Christian, and then you can have right standing with God. And then another group would say, no, you can't keep the law because they don't even know what the law is. They've never even met Moses. It doesn't matter. And some people would say, well, you just have to believe. And some people, that's called easy believism. It's just too easy. And then for 1,500 years, until the Reformation, and then we started arguing about something else. They argued and wrestled with the question, how do you have a right standing with God? How do you know that you're approved? How do you know, and can you really know? I'm just saying, I'm trying to help you get down to the brass tacks. Do you have a right standing with God because of your birth? Do you have a right standing with God because of your behavior? Or do you have a right standing with God because of your belief? Or is it a combination of all three? I think you owe it to yourself to think about this, because 4,000 years ago, before there was anybody called Jewish, Muslim, or Christian, apparently God interacted with a man called Abraham and told him the secret, and the secret is so stunning. How is it that the Most High God could stoop so low and put the cookies on the bottom shelf to say, you can have right standing with me, and I will give it to you if you will trust me? How is it that God, who is perfect in every way, would wade into the middle of our sea of glass and say, I will take care of you, even though you are severely screwed up? That very same God said the key, the secret sauce to having a good relationship with me That spot where you have right standing with me, where you are righteous and approved. It's not through who you're related to. It is not based on your behavior. It is simply trust. Will you trust me? Will you do what Abraham did and will you say, well, it's almost impossible to believe, much less figure out, but I'm going to trust in what you say and that you will do what you promised to do. God did that. It's so simple that we skim over it. And still, even to this day, people miss the point. But what if, write this down, what if the starting point for a relationship with God is trust? What if? What if God started with Abraham that way that he started with Abraham is still the way he relates to us today? That might change some of your thoughts. What if in order to deal with the mess of sin in your life, that he just requires an ordinary, broken, sin-stained man or woman who simply says to God, as best I understand, I trust you. What if? Now, let me tell you something. I know how easy that is to say. I know how easy it is, but it's pretty difficult to actually practice it or embrace it because how you were raised or you heard people like me with microphones strapped to their head give you, I don't know. But I will tell you this. The truth is there is no other place in the world where you will hear this truth of unconditional love and acceptance. That God relates to you solely on the business or on the basis of your trust. It's not going to happen at school, in sports, at work, and sadly, even in some churches sometimes. But if you step back and step up, look at this guy who everybody wants to be theirs, right there in front of God and everybody. Abraham was declared righteous and accepted simply because he trusted that God would do what he said he would do and that he is who he says he is. So, a little bit more work to do. Hope you stick with me through this whole series because each part matters. Go back and catch them all. Here's the last bit. Which of the following best reflects your view? Talk this over when you get a chance with somebody. Which of the following best reflects your view and why? Is it God accepts me based on my birth? God accepts me based on my behavior? Or God accepts me on the basis of my belief? Or is it some combination of those three? That is very important, and that's where we'll pick up next time. Like I told you, that's it? Yep, that's it. You take it. We want to sing a song that's going to drive home this point. It's one song we've added this past year. It's called Same God. It doesn't actually sing about Abraham, but it sings about Joseph and Mary and David, all those. Would you get your heart ready? I'm going to pray, and then we're going to sing this together. Would you let this time be very worshipful and say, God, please do a work in my life? Okay, let's pray. Heavenly Father, I love you so much, and I'm grateful for an opportunity to share important things for us to consider. But I hope that I did not confuse the issue, but made it clearer than it was before. Lord, what you did through the person of Jesus about our sin problem actually can be accessed through something as simple as belief, that you are who you say you are, and you will do what you said you will do. So do a good work in our hearts, our minds, help us to have the courage and strength to do what your wisdom tells us to do, and I pray it in Jesus' name. Amen.